Hello, Somerset County, and welcome to this edition of the Scoop Podcast. My name is Chris Edwards, president of the Somerset County Business Partnership. Before we get started, we have three organizations that have supported the launch of this podcast studio and are our founding partners here at the Business Hub. So I just want to give them a quick shout out. Of course, the County of Somerset, Unity Bank, and Techie Geek. We also have an ad read from Techie Geek that I'd like to read. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Techie Geek, your trusted IT superheroes. They specialize in keeping your business connected, secure, and thriving. From advanced cybersecurity to seamless cloud solutions, Techie Geek has you covered. Visit techiegeek.com or check them out on social at Techie Geek to see how they can power your business forward. But we are joined today. We're doing a lot of work to commemorate Small Business Week here at the Somerset County Business Partnership, and I thought it was really important to get a really holistic overview of what's going on at the state level. And there's no one better to talk about what's going on at the state when it pertains to our small business community than Michael Egenton. Michael is the Executive Vice President and Government Relations for the New Jersey State Chamber of Commerce, representing business community on legislative and regulatory matters to the governor, state legislator, and various state agencies. Michael is the chief lobbyist on environmental, transportation, energy, labor, and government reform issues. Just a little bit of what's going on down there. Welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for the invitation.
So most of our listeners are members of the business partnership, but they might not be familiar from a state level what the State Chamber of Commerce does. So can you talk a little bit from a big picture what the mission of the State Chamber of Commerce is?
Sure. The New Jersey State Chamber of Commerce is the statewide chamber located in our capital city of Trenton. We were created back in 1911. One of the first founding fathers who signed the charter was none other than Thomas Edison, who said there was a need for a statewide chamber to represent the business community, not just to Trenton, but down to our congressional delegation in Washington, D.C. And one of the things unique to our chamber, as you know, Chris, is the advocacy portion of it. We're logistically on West State Street, where the State House Annex, Governor's Office, Legislature convenes. So it's very convenient and easy for us to engage policymakers on a Monday, Thursday legislative day.
And I think for our members in Somerset County, it's really important to know that the business partnership, we're a staff of 6. I do my best to get out and meet with our elected officials. But to your point, to have a partner organization at a state level that is advocating on behalf of the businesses who's right there is so important because, and we're going to talk about it here in a second, but things happen so quickly. They seem slow from a very wide lens, but things happen quickly especially when you get to budget season here, that it's really important to have an organization like yours that's right there, in the room where it happens.
Yep, and I don't want to miss out on the opportunity to say the partnership that we have with your chamber and several of the other countywide chambers is very important because I know when there is a big critical issue, there's hundreds and thousands of different issues that go on, and we know everyone has a busy schedule. But when there is a critical issue, I know there's times that I've called on you. You've come to Trenton. You've helped testify or at least, reach out to your legislators here in, District 16 to let them know the importance or the impact on the business community. So that's greatly appreciated.
No, it's and your guidance is really helpful. From my standpoint, I took over the partnership in 2020, right at the start of the pandemic, and there were so many things happening at one time, even when life was at a standstill, that we needed your leadership, Tom's leadership. And you guys did a great job guiding the state business community through that period. And now it seems like we're almost, although completely different, in a new era of uncertainty that you're helping us guide through. So just from a very big picture, what is the level of chaos right now down in Trenton this spring?
Well, it's interesting. There's like a couple of I don't even want to call them perfect storms that are going right now. And you and I had talked previously about what does the general business community look for? They look for predictability, look for certainty. And right now, it's a nervous time to probably own and operate a business because we have a state budget, the last one being proposed by Governor Phil Murphy. interestingly, his budget he's proposing is a $58 billion budget. Just to put that in perspective, Chris, Governor Florio's last budget was $16 billion.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, and one of the things I think you've heard myself and Tom Bracken and the state chamber team say, that's unsustainable. We can't keep growing the budget at that alarming rate without having some recurring organic revenue to, help. And look, we would love to help everybody, but we're at a precipice right now where we have to prioritize and put our financial house in order. And obviously, we have a gubernatorial election coming up. We'll have a new governor next year. So there's a lot of moving parts. And then, of course, then the other part of the perfect storm is what's going on in the federal government and the uncertainty there on whether it's tariffs or there's talk buzzing going around about a SALT business tax that might be bandied about. All these little pinpoints, impact businesses, and they have to decide, long term, their operations and where they're going to, set their footprint. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when there's so much noise, the typical small business owner tends to not be able to dive into what's really going to impact them. And I think maybe we'll put all the chaos at the federal level aside because it's really hard on a day-to-day basis. By the time this podcast comes out, there could just
be a totally different story.
Yeah. But are there some things going on in Trenton in the next few months that or any small business in New Jersey should at least have their eyes on that are going to really impact them?
Yep. And you and I have always been strong advocates about how important the small business, mom and pop, sole proprietorships, Main Street business, what you have here in Somerville going on, that they're really the crux and strength of our business community. Yes, we have the Fortune 500, but it's those businesses that, want to grow. They want, to hire more employees. They want to be profitable, obviously. And if we allow them to do that, then everybody wins and, we can do more things. But a lot of times when I ask the small business owner, what do you need me to do? What do you want me to do? They say, Michael, just go back to Trent and say, leave us alone.
Right,
We need to do our thing. We know the right thing to do. The other line they always tell me is their most valuable asset is their employees. And a lot of them, treat their employees well, are very flexible, especially what we went through with COVID and everything. When you get a good employee in the door, you want to keep them.
Right.
So the small business owner recognizes and understands that, but they don't need Trenton or Washington to say, you must do this, you must do that. And the litany of mandates that come out and the requirements that come out keep burden, the small business owner. And they say, you got to tell Trenton to put the brakes on, that we will do the right thing. We don't need to be mandated. Or the other scenario is if you do have one bad apple out there, they try to pass a bill that, drags everybody into it and not recognizing that the majority of people do the right thing. And if there is a bad apple out there, they have the wherewithal and resources to go after that individual if they're not doing or complying correctly.
Right. And one of the lessons I've learned about how the bill, it's like the video how the bill is made on a federal level. In New Jersey, it's really kind of a 2-year cycle, right? Because I feel like so many times a bill is introduced, it gets through the process. Let's say it gets passed. Then there's always like a cleanup bill the following year. So there's a lot of companies that they advocate for a certain bill or policy or maybe against, and we always say, it's not over whatever the final process is that year, because there's usually a cleanup right behind it.
And that process, I try to remind people, if you're fortunate, if it's a good bill, and it passes the Senate and Assembly and the governor signs it, very few bills make it up that far. It takes a life of its own when it goes to the regulatory agency and they have to promulgate the rules. And sometimes there might be sort of a different of opinion on how those rules come out. And then we have to challenge them, to say, wait a minute, that's not the way the legislature intended that, piece of legislation to be, or, when the governor signed it. So that could be a problem as well. So it's a constant, you're right, the time that it takes and then, the time it goes to an agency could, really be, mind breaking.
Is there, so last year, I remember a lot of the talk last year was the corporate transit fee that hit our largest of members here in Somerset County. Is there anything, lying in the weeds of the budget this year as you kind of sift through and you start talking with
Right.
legislators that maybe isn't getting enough eyeballs that it should be before we get to a decision time?
Yeah. Now, just on the CBT issue, we fought that with
Yep.
the surcharge 2.5%, and it did go through. So now, we're on top of our 9%, we're 11.5, pretty high, where we didn't want to be. Now, if there's a little piece of good news within that, we're big transportation advocates. We recognize that we need, reliable transit system, transportation structure to get our employees around for our employers. And at least that money, a good portion of it, was allocated to NJ
Right.
Transit
Right.
rather than be diverted into the general fund where they could have spent it on anything. So that's a little bit of a piece of good news there. But as far as his budget proposal, I mentioned Jim Florio at the beginning of this conversation. The unfortunate demise of Governor Florio losing his, next election was what I would call the toilet paper tax. And some of these tax proposals in this FY26 budget is like what I'll call Joe average taxes. You're taxing alcohol, you're taxing cigarettes. There's the cannabis, which we call the cannabusiness part of it. You're taxing that. Internet gambling. If you get a comp room down in Atlantic City, if you're trading in a car, these are what I call Joe average
Right.
taxes, which
Right.
is very interesting because of the timing of our General Assembly members are up for an election this November. So that's 80 seats that are up, including 2 here in Somerset County. And they don't want to run on those types of taxes. I've already talked privately to a lot of legislators, Republican and Democrat, saying we don't support that. As a matter of fact, the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, Senator Paul Sarlo, said, this is not going to be the same budget proposed that we are going to work on and pass at the end of June because they realize that that's going to hit the pocketbooks of the small business owner.
Yeah. Yep. And it's taxes and fees like that to your point, don't grab headlines. You're probably not going to see it when the budget's passed, but it's a death by a thousand cuts to a small business, right?
Right.
And we're certainly, the biggest thing I see when I talk with businesses is you know, attracting and retaining talent where, maybe it's a company that used to have a staff of 10. They've gotten used to 8 or 9 because there's always 1 or 2 positions routinely open. So they've found a way to make it work with 8 or 9. But then every employee who works at that company is really kind of stressed to the max. The long story short, there's just so little wiggle room. It feels like,
Right.
and you add a couple more of these, and you just don't know which one's the one that's going to break the camel's back.
Yeah.
That's my sense.
Yeah. And I when I go and I testify, especially if it's a small business issue, I want to say that the majority of our members again do the right thing, want to do the right thing, and they recognize that having good employees, when you have somebody, you don't have that turnstile of people moving in and out, you're going to work with them. And it's not, Chris, not just like salary and benefits
Right.
anymore. I know when I had a position open at the state chamber, it's flexibility about, all right, is there some hybrid component of it after COVID? My rule was not Mondays and Thursdays. When the legislature's
Right.
in,
Yeah.
we're in, we have to be in because you can't lobby virtually. You have to be over there at the State House. But there's flexibility to look at other things. And I think employers have learned to sort of, accommodate that. But at the same time, too, you see what has happened to the real estate market, commercial and industrial, like downsizing because not everybody's in. Do we need this space?
Yep. Yep.
Should we downsize? And that kind of a ding that it's doing to some of the real estate market as well.
No, I think that's, one of the things that keeps me awake at night is that impact on Somerset County. We have, as you know, a lot of corporate headquarters here and a lot of
Mhm.
major companies, and it's not manufacturing for the most part. Not all, but for the most part, there's a lot of back office, and that's the first thing that's been, people work from home, and now they're looking 5 years later at their lease and they're going, instead of 90,000 square feet, we could definitely get away with 45.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, and that's it, it it's a it is a double-edged sword in the chamber world, right? Because you want to support your business, saving money and becoming more profitable,
Right.
but then you also have commercial real estate companies who are part of the partnership
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
and banks who are
And
financing
let's
these
not,
spaces.
since we're talking Small Business Week, let's not forget that a lot of those, big cities, that have those types of, employers rely on the employees to come there, to go out and use the restaurants
Yep.
and use the, local entertainment, to sort of that trickle effect of, giving back to that municipality or that community as well.
Yeah, and it happens. I'm lucky enough from my office here. I can look out and see Somerville train station right out the windows here, and how many people come off. One of the first things that blew me away when we first moved in here was how many people come off the train 7, 8, 9 a.m. in the morning and come into town and work. So when you say that, it's not a Newark or Jersey City or Manhattan
Right.
issue. It's all these downtowns where there's you know we're these companies are paying this corporate transit fee to keep the system going,
Right.
but there's got to be a place for people to go for
Exactly.
the whole thing to work. So it's unbelievable how all this is intertwined. Is there and this is a great opportunity to give the state chamber a shout out for a typical small business owner who's listening that
Mhm.
knows they need to be more Trenton aware when it comes to impacting their business. How do they better advocate for themselves?
Um, I often say if you're going to make a difference, you pick your niche, what's very important to you. If it's labor issues and labor mandates, then take the time. And I recognize it's probably more challenging for the small business middle market member to take time off from their busy day, but to come to Trenton, there's nothing like, I always call myself the usual suspect when I get up there to testify. But if I could bring a business member, somebody that can offer, their viewpoint on their business operation, somebody who operates a business, has made payroll, so they understand the trials and tribulations of operating a business, to be there to help testify. That's number one. Number two, if they can't do that, to make sure that they are somehow engaged with their local legislators, their mayors, to let them know how important their business is to the operations of that municipality and that jurisdiction, and what they do for the community. Let alone how many businesses, Chris, that you and I know are they never get credit for. Some of them are stealth or quiet about how philanthropic they are, how
Yes.
much they
Yep.
give back to their communities,
Yep.
and what they do for the local softball league, or if there's a sick kid in the community, they help raise funds and things of that nature. We when I say we, the small business community never gets enough credit for that.
Correct. Correct. It's I always say it's those small businesses. When I go to my son's little league game tonight, you'll see their sign out in the outfield. They're
Right.
the same ones who are probably working at town hall, meeting with the mayor. They're the same one that when you do the walk to Washington, they're walking the train.
Yep.
It is and then there's businesses that they give money and you never see them. And I know, one of the things that's really been striking this year is how many nonprofits between the state and the federal budgets are in line for a cut. And I think that's something where both of our organizations are going to be working a lot
Oh,
on is how
yeah.
do we keep our nonprofits as whole as
Absolutely.
possible.
Well, such a high priority. When I went to testify both at Senate and Assembly budget hearings, they had the county college presidents lined up first, and they're being cut $20 million. And my takeaway was we're talking about the future
Right.
workforce. You and I at some point are going to say, okay, I'm done. We're retiring. We got to get the future workforce ready. And you talked about like manufacturing, making sure that we keep that whole and keep funding to some of these critical areas that they should not be cutting. Yeah, the nonprofit community has taken a really hard hit. A lot of folks have said they got scaled down to zero,
Yep.
and they've been coming to these budget hearings saying, here's what I do, here's who I serve, and as I said, it's so important right now for those groups to talk to their legislators in their district and to reach out. If they're fortunate to have the leadership people in their district, whether it's Senate President Scutari from Union County or Speaker Craig Coughlin from Middlesex County, to reach out to them and let them know how important it is, what they do, the services they provide, critically important. Because just imagine if that all goes away, what happens next, Chris?
Yeah.
You know?
And one of the things for our members out there who are trying to sift through the confusion, Somerset County is lucky enough. We have 6 legislative districts, which means 18 representatives at the state. Senate President Scutari actually has 2 towns in Somerset County. So we can help. And if we can, certainly the state chamber can help make those connections. One of the things I don't think you guys get enough credit for is the number of events you do around the state. I always said, I don't know how you go from Cape May up to Sussex County on events on back-to-back days or back-to-back weeks, but that's
My wife has a nickname for me. She calls me Turnpike Mike. I'm up and down the turnpike.
Yeah, you need your own lane.
Yeah.
But it's whether it's young professionals or trainings, they do a great job. So that's something, if you're looking to get a little bit more active on the government affairs side, I highly recommend. So before we kind of get to our lightning round, before we end, is there anything else going on in your neck of the woods that you'd like to make our members aware of?
We just had a very successful return after a 5-year hiatus because of COVID to our, you mentioned the Walk to Washington, which I don't believe there's any other state nationally that pulls something off like this. We have 14 Amtrak cars, 1,000 people, probably another 200 that meet us down in Washington, D.C., 2 days, 1 night. You've participated. You're very familiar with it. And it's just networking on steroids. It's just, it's hard to describe unless you do it. And I always tell people, if it's your first trip, you start off in car number 1 or 14, get a stack of business cards, keep going, 3-minute rule with everybody.
Yep.
So you'll follow up with them. That's how you get your value out of it if it's your first time venture. What I was very happy about was the fact that we, people who missed it, were really happy that it was back. We had a lot of new young people take the Walk to Washington, which, really did my heart good to see that because, again, they're the future workforce,
Yep.
future employers of the state. And then, of course, just the timing of a gubernatorial election was very exciting. We had the majority of the gubernatorial candidates, both on the train and down in D.C. with us, talking about business issues. So very important to get in front of them because we don't know who the next governor is going to be next year.
Yeah, and I've had I've gone on the train to represent the partnership, and then going way back, as I mentioned to you off camera before, back in my political days, and I got to see it from a young staffer. Definitely deer in the headlights. My first time, 15 years ago with either John Adler or Frank Pallone, and just to see. And to your point, it's the number of business leaders, not just the elected officials, but if you're, if you go to these events and you go, hey, I've always wanted to meet, the gubernatorial candidates or my elected official or maybe the president of a bank. And then it's not going to happen at a normal business card exchange. They're all there, and there's nowhere for them to hide on the train.
Captive audience.
Yes,
exactly.
That's the thing.
Right.
You bump into them, and you get to speak to them, and there's no way they can go to dodge you. So
that's right. That's right. No, and and they understand that. What's again really encouraging is they're returning customers as well. They do like the trip. They also see how important it is to network and make those connections with, whether it's, the business community representatives that are on that train or the legislators. They, like meeting folks. And like I said, this last one that we did is great. We're going to be rotating it with the our business summit that we started during COVID in Atlantic City because that was very successful. So the way to always remember is to think of the acronym ACDC. 1 year will be in Atlantic City, the other year will be in DC.
Maybe we could play the Back in Black album too.
Album.
So it's my first car was a black pickup truck, and I think I just played that CD on repeat all the time.
It's a great album. You can always keep playing that album.
All right, so let's get to our lightning round.
Yeah.
This, Michael, always gives our chance for our members to get a little bit knowledge out of our guest and to highlight some stuff that you typically wouldn't cover in a typical podcast. So you're someone who's traveled up and down the state. Do you have a favorite place to eat in Somerset County when you get up into this area?
I was up here recently for a wake, so I went to Chimney Rock because it was across the street from the funeral facility. But to cheat, and I knew I had to eat quick, and we don't have them down in South Jersey. I went to 30 Burgers.
Okay, that's good. Both are good.
Yeah.
That's Chimney Rock is one of our faves. So you mentioned the walk to Washington. Is there a favorite event this state chamber does that you look forward to every year?
When that's in the rearview mirror and I'm done with it because of the logistics of putting that together is, I can't even describe it of trying to pull that off. But you get a great, feeling of pulling it off, transporting that many people down to Washington, D.C. for a 2-day, 1-night thing. The walk has always been phenomenal in my book. And I always tell people, if you've never tried it, at least try it once. It may not be your cup of tea.
Right.
I remember there was a certain high-level individual that's, did it once and said to me, I can't go on that again. I said, why? They said, I'm claustrophobic.
Yep.
So it's not for everybody, but, I always tell folks, at least try it once.
Yep. No, I can't imagine. I mean, we do, the annual meeting is a 2.5-hour event and we're burnt out. I can't imagine a 2-day program hauling them, down to Washington. What's outside of that event? Is there a favorite part of your job? What you do is very grinding. You're dealing with a lot of personalities. But what's when you get home? Like, what's one of those parts you can look back and go, I really enjoy that piece.
I really, even my wife says, she says she says you bleed the chamber. You really I wouldn't be at it as long as I have 30 plus years, and it's a combination of. First, I have to say we have a great staff. We have great leadership. I represent, the titans of industry. The state chamber's board is, businesses throughout the whole state. And I feel I'm the liaison between, the business community, private sector to both the governor's office and the legislature. And of course, I can't be remiss about the county local chamber leaders that I've created good friendships and partnerships with. I think the strength in our numbers and in what we do is so critically important. And I always say, keep doing what you're doing, anything that we can do at the state chamber to help your cause, because we need our county local chambers so critically important. You're the eyes and ears to Main Street, what's going on. And times that you've reached out to me, Chris, and say, hey, Mike, are you aware of this? And I wasn't. And that's why I appreciate the working relationship we have with you and others.
No, it's been mutually beneficial. I know there's many times where things are going on that I'm not aware of, and you've been equally helpful. And I think that a little insider here, there's a weekly call amongst the state and the regional chambers, and I think that has been extremely helpful because there's things that you're working on. Again, it's these small chambers. I don't want to speak for a lot of the chamber presidents, but there's stuff that we want to do more in government affairs, and then the day-to-day happens, and you get pulled away. So we need people like you and Tom down there leading.
And then I always say the publication that my colleague and I, Amir, work on, Trenton Watch, is for you all to utilize to communicate to your members. And it's pretty easy to read. Thumbs up, we like it. Thumbs down, we don't. So it's it's not rocket science, but it hopefully gives you a perspective, bird's eye view, what's going on in Trenton.
And last but not least, when you just need to get out of the state, you're done probably right after January or June 30th.
Right.
Where's your favorite place to go on vacation?
Well, I know I'm probably going to hear about this if anybody in the state office is here, but for years, as my daughter Tara, my son Liam were growing up, we were big fans of going down to Cape May. But my brother Brian has a place down in Delaware, so we like, crossing over the bridge, to go over to his place because it's an affordability issue.
Yep.
But, still in my heart of hearts, Cape May is great. But, to kind of get away. And I call my brother's place there, Shangri-La.
Well, look, we all need a place like that. Michael, thank you so much for joining our podcast and giving our members a little bit of insight on kind of what gets done behind the scenes down in Trenton. And until we talk again.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.